Hello, welcome
Hello.
back. Welcome back to the Flourish Podcast. My name is Michelle Holmes.
And I am Devin and we are so excited to be welcoming the new year 2024. This is the time of year when a lot of people really want to focus on their goals, be very intentional, and really try to better themselves. And one of the ways people try to better themselves is to read more. And I know we both enjoy reading. We've talked on various podcasts, various episodes about a lot of the different books that we kind of go to, are kind of our favorite books. And so we thought that today we'd talk about maybe kind of 10 of our favorite books when it comes to personal development. This list, when we were kind of curating this list, there's a chance this could have been a top 25 or top 50. There's a lot of great books out there. And so these just happen to be 10 of them. And would certainly encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look and read them. So that's kind of what, I guess we'll take turns. We each have a handful of books that we want to talk about today. And so, Michelle, why don't you start off?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the first book, I love that we're doing this list because I have several that I just refer to that have over the years been really still to this day very powerful, very in the forefront of my mind. One that I think of is Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yes.
And if you have taken my vision board workshop, you know that I reference James Clear in one of his awesome quotes that is practically, I could say it in my sleep at this point. But James Clear is a wonderful author, and I really, really enjoy his work, and I enjoy his writing style as well. And Atomic Habits, to me, I think is one of those just such a well-written and comprehensive book about habits. Devin, when we first got together for our list, Atomic Habits was also on your list.
It was, yes.
Yeah, so I think it's a very solid book. I think it's a very enjoyable read, and it's one of those books that you could come back to yearly and pick up something new each time. And I think that's kind of how all of my books on my list are, is you could read it yearly and still pick up some new things to implement. And so Atomic Habits, if you're trying to start a new habit, I think that that's one of the best books to start with, to give you some momentum and some ideas on how to bring some positive new habits into your life.
All right. Okay, so I will take the baton now. And my first book is The Happiness Equation by Neil Pasricha. And it probably is not a surprise. I've referenced this book, I think, on a number of episodes. Neil Pasricha, he's Canadian. And so I'm Canadian as well. You may not know that. New fact. But he's also, he's considered one of a leader in intentional living. And I had the opportunity to see him at a conference a number of years ago, and it was such a powerful presentation. And he talked about the whole story, and it's actually a story that's, it's quite sad, and it's a bit tragic. The things that he went through, and what, kind of his way to heal was to really reflect on, yes, things may be not, things aren't going the way he wants them to go. Things aren't going according to plan, according to what he had envisioned. But he was able to find things to celebrate on a regular basis. And so he actually started just almost as therapy, started a blog called 1000 Awesome Things. And it's just every day he would write about things, just very short snippets about things to be grateful for. I have a couple, but I should have looked at these before. Things like, oh no. All right. Wow. Okay. Sleeping on new bed sheets. That's a good one. Putting on fresh underwear as it is after it comes out of the dryer. I think that goes along. There are a lot of things anyway, but what he did is he created this blog, and it ended up being, he won an award. It ended up being like the #1 blog in all of the internet. And it was, he got, just unexpectedly became, very well known. And so he wrote a book, the Book of Awesome, which is not the book we're talking about now. A Book of Awesome, which is just kind of this collection of lists. And he's continued to write those. But really what he did is he took all of his learnings and really kind of answer the question of how do we define happiness? How do we find happiness? And so he wrote this book, The Happiness Equation, which we're talking about. It really challenges kind of the old way of thinking. The old way of thinking, as we've talked about before, is, you work hard, you be successful, and that will lead to happiness. And his new way of thinking was, no, actually, if you have a mindset of happiness, then that will put you in a state of mind where working hard, that's just part of what you do, and that will lead to success. But the actual equation, and it's on the cover of the book, is want nothing plus do anything equals have everything. And it really challenges kind of the mindset that a lot of people have, that you have to have everything to be happy. And this was really being happy with what you have, doing what brings you joy, and that will give you everything that you want in life. And so it breaks down. There's so much more. We were talking earlier. I could talk about this book for an entire episode. But really, he kind of talks through the 9 secrets of happiness, and just how important just very simple things are to really shift your mind so that you're not always focused on the negative, which I think a lot of us kind of get caught into. And but we're able to kind of flip that, to have the right attitude so that we can move forth every day and have this mindset of happiness. So that is my #1 book, is The Happiness Equation.
Love it. I have read The Happiness Equation and also loved it and found it very valuable. And it is, I believe, still to this day, my husband's favorite book. So definitely high on the list for us all here.
Yes.
#2 for me is Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. And this is a book that I have gifted over the years to friends and mentors even. And I just love, I have 2 on my list from Greg. He just puts this essentialism book together. I think it's also a very enjoyable read for me. One of those books I could come back to year after year. But it was really about, I think a lot of times we have so much going on. And for me, I discovered this book when I was pursuing minimalism for the first time in my life. Yeah. And getting really into that, and how does that spill over into our mindset and into our work life as well. So not just what is surrounding us, how many clothes we have, how many things in our environment, but also just how we approach life. And so Essentialism, I thought, was such a great read for helping that mindset be cultivated even more. Of, it's not about doing all of the things and being super busy, and it's really getting clear and being more effective by having some clarity for ourselves. So Essentialism, that's high on the list for me.
Okay. And it's a book I know because you introduced it to me. So thank you for that. Yeah, so next book on my list is, switching gears a little bit, is All Marketers Are Liars. And this is a classic book by Seth Godin. And I know it's kind of, shifting gears because it sounds like it's a very, a book that's really focused for marketing professionals. But it really has some great concepts that can be applied not only in work in general, but in how we interact with different peoples. And really kind of the I guess the underlying theme of All Marketers Are Liars. And my version, I know it's been published, but it's actually All Marketers Are Liars, but the liars are crossed off, so it's renamed All Marketers Tell Stories. And it's about the fact that everyone has their own worldview. Everyone thinks a certain way, and we want to believe we believe what we want to believe. And one of the great examples he gives is he talks about the Rydell Glass Company, and I'll try to give you a quick synopsis of that. Is the fact that there's this idea that Rydell has given us, that if you want to drink a certain type of wine, you have to drink it from a certain type of glass, and that different glass will enhance the flavor of how that particular wine will taste. And so they have an entire line of glasses with all different shapes and sizes. And they've sold the people on this idea that you have to have a different glass. If you're drinking a Chardonnay, you need one glass. If you're drinking a Merlot, you need a different glass. And the reality is that scientifically, there's no difference. But it's all in the marketing. And if we believe that, and if we want to believe that, when we drink out of that glass, if we drink a cab out of a cab glass, in our mind, it will taste better because of that. And so this whole idea that another example is, if you go to a restaurant and you pay a lot of money for a very expensive meal, it will taste better because your mind is justifying the money that you spent. So it's really the fact that what we need to do as we're talking to people, if we want to have a conversation, if we're trying to convince them, or if we're in the sales road, we're trying to sell them on something, what we want to do is we want to do a better job understanding what their worldview is. Because if we try to sell them something that goes against what they believe, we're not going to have a lot of success. But if we can align the story that we tell that supports and aligns with the way they already think, then we'll have a much better way of doing it. And I use this a lot, back, I'm not going to get into the details, but I used to sell polymer piping systems, and really employing that to overcome a lot of the challenges that people would give. If you're able to tell your story in a way that it aligns with what they believe and what's important to them, then it's very helpful. So if you're in a sales role, or if you're actually in any role where you're part of what you do is to try to encourage people one way or another, I think it's a very useful book that changes the way you approach the selling process. So All Marketers Tell Stories by Seth Godin.
That is one that I will have to read because I've never read it before, but I have heard the expression that everyone is selling something, and every single person, regardless of what your role is, if you're not a sales or a marketing kind of role, it's like, well, you still have to learn. Of course, you don't have to, but it would benefit you to learn some of these really valid, important points. So
yes,
I like it. To me, it's reminds me of, well, when you're little and you're trying to convince your family to get a puppy. That would have been a helpful book to have on the docket there. Yeah. So next on my list is also another one by Greg McKeown, and I hope I'm saying his name properly, but it is Effortless. Make it easier to do what matters most. So I recommended Essentialism. This one is Effortless. And with everything that we've talked about on the podcast, especially regarding burnout, I really enjoyed Effortless because he also mentions burnout and ways to avoid burnout, and some really thought-provoking content in Effortless. So to me, I think Essentialism came out, I believe, in 2015. Effortless came out fairly recently, over the last, I think, couple of years now, possibly. So Effortless is the one that I will be gifting recently here, because I made it through Essentialism. And so Effortless is one that I would highly recommend for anyone who considers themselves a high performer or high achiever, who does a lot and wants to have a good life, which is, of course, everything that we're talking about on the podcast here, very prevalent. So I think our listeners would really value that book if they have not already read it.
And I just love the title, Effortless. Right? Because we've talked so much about what as high, with high performers, so much of what we do on a day-to-day basis is a challenge. It's so hard. And this idea that, we can make it easier. What's the tagline? It's making it easier to do what matters most, is something that I think resonates with a lot of people if we can get there. So. All right.
Yeah. And I will also add, I enjoyed this book so much that I actually listened to interviews about the book. And I think that was even the first way that I discovered it was through an interview with Greg on YouTube with another YouTuber, Matt Diavella. And they were talking about this concept of effortless. And so it was just just the content that they speak about, the stories that they share. That's one thing I really enjoy about Greg is he includes stories in his book and in the books that he writes. So I think that we can learn a lot from that. And even his interviews about what the book was about were really engaging, very thought-provoking as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next book, I'm going to go way back.
Okay.
And because I think it's a classic that I think that many people have read. I want to say most people have read it, or everyone has read it, but that's not true. And that is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Just because I think it, that might be sort of a gimme. It's sort of like the what's the other one? How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's like kind of the standard business books. And so, I'm kind of hitting the easy button on this one because it is. But I, as I was contemplating at first, do I put this book on here? Because it's sort of a gimme, but also it was written a while ago. And I actually thought it was written a long, long time ago, but it was written in 1989, which I get it. For some people, that is a long, long time ago. I guess it is. And so the question I had was, do we include a book like this because does it stand the test of time? Is it still relevant in 2024? And I was kind of, I had to actually go through it again because there are, obviously there are books that do not stand the test of time, that over time, as society continues to evolve, as people change and views change, there are certain things that don't make sense anymore, right? And we can do a whole episode on things like that. But I was looking at it, and one of the things that he talks about is one of the reasons why it was so groundbreaking back in the late 80s is because it shifted the thought of where prior to that time, there was such a focus on character, on things like, things that we, things we want to aspire to. But then in the 80s, what we saw is this shift towards a focus on personality, where, really developing your public image is much more important than kind of the what's behind that. And I think that is even more relevant today. You look at social media and sort of this of what people are aspiring to do. And some of the things that we see people do, it puts them in positions where they compromise these core principles like integrity, humility, patience, empathy. And so I still think it's very, very timely. It's very relevant. And so I do encourage it, the 7 habits. And I won't go through all of them, but just, things like being proactive, putting first things first, thinking win-win. And part of one thing I always remind myself of is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so so many great things, and it's an easy read, and I think it's something that everyone should take the time and read, whether you're in for your business, in business setting, or just in general. So I think it talks a lot about just the importance of character and what you want to do to kind of mold yourself around. So I know it was an easy one, but that might be like my bonus one. So Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Good. Well, I'm about to shock you. I have never read it.
Oh, see, I was going to ask you, but I didn't want to put you on the spot. So
no, I've never read it. It's been recommended over the years. So, of course, you can't be in the personal development space without knowing some of the foundational books in personal development. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
For me, I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit with these last two.
Okay.
And so I'm going to include It's Not Your Money, How to Live Fully from Divine Abundance by Tasha Silver. And this is a fun one. This was a very enjoyable read for me. I read it not too long ago, fairly recently. Mm-hmm. And it's one that you can take your time with, because she actually recommends to kind of space it out week by week. So you have the introduction and everything. You get some knowledge under your belt here on her viewpoint, at least. And then you have kind of this week 1, week 2 chapter by week situation happening. And I think anyone who feels like they want to work on their money mindset is this would be a great place to start. It is mindset oriented. It's spiritual as well. But I believe that your money mindset is definitely involved in your overall personal development. Like, it's all kind of related. So for me, I was like, this is different. This is not like setting habits and achieving goals and things like that. It's more loosey-goosey, maybe we'll say. But I just love the stories that she shares in the book. I love the examples that she gives, because I think sometimes when it comes to personal development or self-help, there can be this element of, well, are you type A, talking about self-help and personal development in that way? Or are you more of this like woo-woo spiritual kind of focus, and how they can be so different? And she kind of unites both of them, I think, from my perspective, because she's bringing out the skeptic people and the questions that you might ask about, well, what does money have to do with spirituality, and what is a divine abundance, and all of this. So anyways, if you're curious about money mindset in general, limiting beliefs, and even just divine abundance or spirituality and how that can play a role, I would highly recommend It's Not Your Money by Tasha Silver.
All right. Okay, so now I'm going to go, well, not off the beat. I'm not sure which path we're on, so I can't really say I'm going off the path. But this next book is a little more specific. We've talked a lot of the books I've brought up, everyone can sort of relate to it depending on their role. But this one is very specific to managers and people, if you're in a position where you're managing people. And it's a book by Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman, and it's called First Break All the Rules. Have you read that?
No.
Okay, so see, I asked you then. So First Break All the Rules, and this kind of the subtitle is What the World's Greatest Managers Do Differently. And one of the things, I read this first years ago, when I was managing an office down in San Diego. And so I thought, this is what I need to learn, what's important when it comes to how you work with people when you have direct reports. And the thing that's really interesting about, what the authors did is this was all based on a very extensive study that they did. So it's not like they just grabbed, it's what they thought, of what's important. Is they actually interviewed, it says here, over 80,000 managers in over 400 companies, and they looked at how those companies performed based on how those managers acted. And one of the big quotes is that people leave managers, not companies. And I think of that a lot, because I hear from people who who work for a great company, they like their job, but they leave, and it's because of their managers. You look at some companies where you can have different, I worked at a company where we had different regional managers, and there was one specific region where they had just turnover and turnover, turnover. And so it's still the same company, but when the way you manage people, the way you treat people has all the difference in the world, and how you're able to just get the most out of them and really maintain a organization or department or group or segment that really flourishes. And so, I think about some of the things, it's called first break the rules, because what they talk about, a lot of the recommendations they give, kind of break the mold as to how, you normally think of how to manage people. And, one of the key takeaways is the fact that sometimes the mindset when you work your way up the corporate ladder, so to speak, and become into a position where you have direct reports, sometimes it's the mindset is, oh, these people, they work for me, they have to do what I say, I'm the boss now, and it's sort of, you get this sort of power trip, this ego that takes over when you don't have the business goals first and foremost. And so really the key is that successful businesses have happy employees. You make sure your employees are happy. It's so simple, right? And so really the focus, the focus should always be on what can I do to empower my employees to give them the tools they need, the resources they need to be as successful as possible. Because when my employees are successful, then I'm successful, the organization is successful. So it's really shifting away from kind of internalizing, looking at what can I do to be the best manager, to how can I succeed, but how can my employees succeed? Because when they succeed in everything so much better. And so there's so much more into it, but that's just, I wanted to give you just a really small snippet of why I think this is just such a powerful book. And I certainly learned a lot in reading that. And as an engineer, I really appreciated the fact that this was very data driven. They took a very methodical, scientific approach to come to the conclusions that they came to. And so really, really recommend that. So that is First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman.
Love it. That one is on the top of my list with that description, because something that I truly believe in is kind of a secondary motto around here for Team Flourish, is that happy, healthy employees create sustainable, profitable organizations. So I love this description that you're giving me here. Yeah. I will absolutely read that one and get back to you. Okay. And then to round out my list, lastly, I will recommend, this is another one, definitely off the beaten path, we'll say here. This has a very spiritual perspective. So if you're not into that, you don't read the book. You're not going to love it. But I loved this one and learned so much. And I actually have this in a Kindle version. And with the Kindle version, you can highlight pages and quotes and everything. And I highlighted so many because I had so many good takeaways. It's Messages from the Masters: Tapping into the Power of Love by Brian Weiss, I think it is. Weiss.
Weiss.
Weiss. Weiss.
Weiss. I think Weiss.
Weiss. He's a doctor. He's an MD, and he basically discovered this he had a really interesting experience when he had a client. This is his second book. I also recommend highly his first book, but has this focus on reincarnation and regressive past lives experiences. So, like I said, it's got this component that you might not resonate with, but the takeaways from the book were so powerful with just how we can be better humans, what purpose is for us on this planet, how that shows up, what our experiences are, like how we can make the best out of our experiences, our learnings and the lessons that we have on our own life path. I just absolutely, this was one of my all-time favorite reads. So it's definitely one of the more spiritually focused books. Like you, as an engineer, I just love the data and I love the science and the very specific. That's why I love James Clear and his logical brain, and also with Greg McKeown, how they write. And so I love books like that. But then this one is just on the complete other spectrum here, and I have some major takeaways from it. So highly recommend, definitely worth the read.
All right. And so I will round out my list by I am kind of going on the same path you are, the often beaten path. And I was actually struggling a little to trying to decide whether or not to include this, because you'll hear by the title, it is a pretty exclusive, it's meant for a very specific audience. The last book I talked about was meant specifically for managers, and this is just for men. So but I'll throw it out there. And so the book is called When Men Think Private Thoughts, by Gordon MacDonald, and the subtitle is Exploring the Issues That Captivate the Minds of Men. And the reason I brought this book up, because I think about the books I've read. We've read a lot of books over the years, and this is a book that really stuck out to me because it was actually a gift given to me by my father-in-law. And my father-in-law, unfortunately, he passed this last year. And he's a man I just had an incredible amount of respect for. And he was a pastor. And Gordon MacDonald, the author of this book, is also a pastor. So kind of in line with what you were talking about with previous books that you brought up, it does, talk about spirituality. And so, but it really, it challenges kind of what it means to be, a male in society. What are the things, that there are, I think, I remember reading this because I was, this was quite some time ago. It's a little bit dated. But there, I was thinking about what are the expectations that are placed upon men, as they become fathers, as their husbands, as they're working, what are things that people expect. And I think that there's a lot of, from male mindset, at least at the time, this was a while ago, but there were pretty low expectations when it came to what men were called to do, say, in the home, or when it came to helping with kids and things like that. And this really talks about what does it really mean? How do you define a man's life, when it comes to identity, masculinity, relationships, and things like that. So it can get a little uncomfortable, but it really kind of, I think even today, even though, I think views on masculinity and being a male have definitely changed, evolved, and gotten better. I think it's something that is a worthy read. So that's kind of my last on the list. It's When Men Think Private Thoughts, exploring the issues that captivate the minds of men.
I love that. We have a pretty split audience with our women and men. Definitely we've seen our analytics, and I think that many of our viewers could really benefit from a book like that. It makes me want to buy it for my husband so that he could read.
Yeah. So we've talked about, we just kind of put out 10 books that we've read that we recommend. So I have a question. I'm putting on the spot now, Michelle.
Yeah.
2024. Are there any books on your to read list? Anything that you're looking forward to reading?
Well, yes, actually, in the course of our conversation today, I am very much looking forward to reading the First Break All the Rules book that you had mentioned. That one sounds like it's going to be a really enjoyable read for me. Just learning, continuing all the time. I mean, I'm a big reader. Sometimes I am not a big book reader, but I'm constantly reading. And so sometimes I'm reading studies or articles, things, blogs and everything. It's nice though to have a book that's well written, that's structured, and that's actually has a scientific method with it. So that excites me from your list. What about you, Devin?
So I actually have a couple of books, and these are books that they're just on my to read list, so I can't vouch for them now. I don't know if they're any good. Maybe I'll ask you if you've read. So one is called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, and it talks about kind of that creative process, and as a writer, as an artist, things that you can work through. So I'm looking forward to reading that. There's a book that I actually bought. It's sitting right here, that I have not read yet. And it's called, I know you can't see it if you're listening to just the audio, but it's called You're Not Listening, What You're Missing and Why It Matters. And it talks about how in today's society, we're so focused on, what we're going to say next, or how we present ourselves, that we don't actually critically listen to what people are telling us. And so that's what I got from the back cover. I haven't read it yet, so I'm looking forward to reading that. So I can maybe give you a book report on that in a later episode. But I think I'm looking forward to kind of getting into that, because it does talk about the importance of communication and how, as a society, we've gotten really bad at having conversations, two-way conversations. We're just used to the one-way blasts that we put out on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our list. So maybe not the 10 very best books you have to read right now, but certainly 10 books that mean a lot to us and we've been able to benefit from. So would love to hear, what books are on your top 10 list. What are other books that you would recommend? We can kind of put a list together.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for listening today. Good luck on your book reading adventure. And we can't wait to hear what some of your good takeaways are, the books that you recommend. We will catch you in the next episode.